Welcome to Culture Crush with me, your host, Dan Dowman, where we get to meet some of the world's leading culture shapers, future makers, and power shakers. We're talking groundbreaking cultures, leadership challenges, and what you can do about them. Today on the show, I'm joined by my new friend, Mhairi Ramsay. Mhairi, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. I'm really excited.
You know, this is a lovely moment for me because, as I said, we're new friends. We only met recently on an ever-present source in my life at the moment, which is LinkedIn, of course. I had Hannah Brady on the show back when Culture Crush was called Strategy Shorts, and we talked about the world of AI and copywriting and how copywriters can engage with that kind of subject in a really, really healthy way. And you have an interesting relationship with Hannah, and she was the person who recommended that you join me for Culture Crush. So fill us in. Tell us, what's that relationship? Like, how do your worlds collide? And, well, maybe, why did she suggest you come on Culture Crush?
Yeah, I suppose that's the point of the matter. So I've known Hannah for about 5 years, I think, nearly. So before she started the Brady Creative with Helen, I met her through an event that I was speaking at, which was around building high-performing teams. And it was a chamber event run by our local Chamber of Commerce, and probably one of the first group presentations I did after I started my own business. So it was just an interesting time, but Hannah really stood out. She was so engaged, so interested in what I was saying, probably asked more questions than anybody else. And people like that leave a lasting memory. And I started a book club because I'm a big reader. A lot of my learning I've done through reading. And Hannah came to that, brought some other people along, so sort of introduced me to a few people. And then when she started her own business, our friendship grew. She got me into golf, which is now a full-time obsession. Could just about manage work in between. And she started her business, and I was supporting her as a friend. And then she and Helen, her mother, asked me to come on board as a board director to help them build a company, because while they both know extremely well what to do, how to deliver for clients, and perhaps there was less experience in running the business on the practical side. So that's our connection. But we are still friends. We do still play golf together, despite all that. So I guess she knows how important culture is to me. And, a lot of the questions where I challenge the board are around, well, are you doing that because it's the right thing for the business, or are you doing that for because this is the business you want to grow? What is this business? What's the culture of this business? What do you stand for? Rather than, can we make enough money?
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about Brady Creative, because obviously they've not been around for a long time, but they are growing quite quickly as a business. And any company that's growing quickly is going to have to face those cultural questions. Because when you start a business, like year 1, year 2, it can feel like it's all about execution. Like, how do we just do a good job for our clients? But actually, as soon as you add one person to the team, 2 people to the team, 3 people to the team, you're then building a culture. And the question is, how do you build and maintain and safeguard a sense of culture, being in it together, taking ownership when you start to grow? I sometimes think it can be quite easy when your team is very, very small, but actually it gets harder and harder and harder. So it's so important for business owners not to overlook in those very early stages. That's where you need to start building those policies. That's where you need to start planting those seeds of culture. Because if you want to grow, you'll run into problems very, very quickly. So even if you're a small team, you've got to put your minds to work, do that inner work early, because that's going to set you up for success in the future. Now, I have noticed that that Brady Creative have launched their own podcast. So I want to say to anyone who's watching this or listening to this, go and check it out. I'm very proud of how Culture Crush is showing up in the world, but I have to say their podcast studio makes me green with envy. One day, hopefully Culture Crush will have one of its own, but we'll see. Now, you are also growing your own business. You're the director of Tomrom, team coaching company. You mentioned before that you've done this talk on developing team dynamics, but you also enjoyed a long stretch at Sainsbury's. And so I'm interested to hear a bit more, to get behind the scenes of your journey, and how your career has developed and how you've ended up launching and leading Tomrom and in this world of team dynamics and team development.
It's a reasonably long journey. When I was doing my A-levels, I really struggled with being in the education system. I'm sure that people who tried to educate me would agree. I just had enough. It was time for me to do something different. So I signed up, much to my mother's relief, I'm sure. I signed up as a Sainsbury's trainee manager, and they were fantastic. The leadership training we were given, the sense of being part of a cohort as well, I think was really powerful. You learnt alongside other people. So for me, that's something that stuck with me for a long time. I had a great career with Sainsbury's, really enjoyed my job very much. Would often say I love my job. If it wasn't for the people, it would be perfect. But we'll come back to that. And then my family came along, my children, and it just wasn't practical to work within retail, much as they were very flexible. And I did, I ran a department part-time, which was quite groundbreaking all those years ago. Not so much now. And so then I started working at a local business who were a wholesaler supplying care homes. And it was quite small. It was doing about 500,000 a year out of the back of a pharmacy. And I started at the same time as one of the sons was brought back into the business with the idea of developing it. And together we did that. We developed it and we grew it to, well, when I left, it was about 20 million turnover. And through that, I guess I brought my experience from Sainsbury's, a lot of my leadership experience. When we first started, there was 4 of us, and when I left, there was 70, I think. So when it came to leading and to the structure of the business, I felt that was something that I had quite a big hand in. I also learned a ton of skills that, I never had before, didn't know I needed, in terms of entrepreneurialism, whatever that word might be. But in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, we had recognized that I couldn't do everything on my own, and we started to build a leadership team that would support me. And I did some personal development, which sort of changed my entire outlook on developing people. And I really came to enjoy that part of the role. So when ultimately it was time for me to move on, it was a difficult decision as to what to do and whether or not to. A lot of people suggested I coach, and I was a bit reluctant, I think. I felt I had all this experience that I've been through so many different things that could help other people. But I wasn't quite sure how to sell it. And then I started doing some mentoring and absolutely loved that. And at which point I formalized a lot more around my mentoring and coaching. And I was also introduced to team coaching, which again goes back to that philosophy of you learn together. It's not one person at the front of the room teaching you. You are learning from each other, from your own leadership or your learning journey. Not everybody learns the same thing at the same time. And it's exactly the same concept as a book club. Everybody reads the same book, but not everybody takes the same from it. And it's actually the sharing of that information that is the most rewarding part. So, so then I launched Tomrom. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. And yeah, I love it.
What I like about that story is that you entered into that Sainsbury's workplace and experienced what good training looked like, what it looked like to learn together, to belong together, to be part of a cohort, as you put it. And it feels like that was a thread that you just naturally began to pulling on through your career, and something that kept unraveling and revealing itself to you all the way through to this point where you yourself were now, with the experience of, I guess, being on the shop floor, so to speak, being part of that cohort, to then leading your own cohort, like taking that leadership role within within business. And then I guess the last stage of that journey is going through some of that personal development yourself and that personal training, and realizing that, well, with my experience of what it's like to be part of a team, my experience of what it's like to lead a team, and my experience with now personal development, Tomrom became like an obvious natural extension of all those experiences. Now, I'm curious about the name Tomrom. Give us a bit of an idea about what that means or where that came from.
So we built our own house, and our house is called Tomrom. And Tomrom means two voids, two empty spaces. So in Norwegian. So my partner, my husband, he lived in Norway for a little while, and our house has got a lot of space. It's designed around like having these extra spaces. So it just seemed like an ideal name for the house. And then when it came to the business, I work in creating space for people to communicate properly, space for people to feel comfortable. And within teams, you have to create space. It can't just be about the work. You have to create space to think, and you have to create space for people to develop. So it was perfect. And when you've got a name like Mhairi, why not have a weird business name as well? So.
Well, I love that. I love that idea of creating spaces. So I think what I've just learned through our little language lesson together there is that toe means two in Norwegian, and Tomrom means void. So toe Tomrom means two voids. And in your consulting practice, what you're really saying is we are creating spaces, we're creating opportunities, safe spaces for people to grow and learn, which I think is just terrific. Now, you've got lots of experience in the culture space, lots of experience growing teams, helping organizations grow and expand and maintain a sense of as a positive culture. And with organizations like Brady Creative and through Tomrom, I guess you're bringing that challenge into other spaces and trying to be a guardian of those passion points for you through your business. We love to talk about culture on this show. Obviously, it's called Culture Crush. And I know that you've been thinking about who your culture crush is. We will get on to talk about challenges and solutions. We love to get practical on the show. But why don't you take me through who your culture crush is and why you've chosen them?
So my culture crush is a company called Zappos. They're an online prominently shoe retailer. And they're now owned by Amazon. They're part of the Amazon group now. They sold out to Amazon. They were created by a man called Tony Hsieh, who wrote a book called Delivering Happiness. And I was fortunate enough to attend a culture camp. I say that every time. A culture camp at Zappos head office in Las Vegas. Had to be done. And they have their differentiating factor, if you like, is their customer service, this concept of delivering happiness. And it was life-changing for me. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. It was a 5-day residential course, and the course is run in the basement, and so you're kind of shut off from the rest of the business, but you are allowed out, and you do get to integrate with people, which is fantastic. but they are such a culture-led business. It's, I think they have 10 points of culture. Yeah, 10 core values they have. But their core values are things like create fun, little weirdness. They truly allow people to embrace who they are. And particularly when you're running any form of customer service, I think you have to give people confidence in being themselves, because when you feel confident being yourself, you interact well with others because you're genuinely interested in what people have to say. And that's what it taught me, was that actually if you're genuinely interested in other people, you will get so much more out of your interactions. And we see it often in leadership that fear actually creates a lot of poor leadership, because people are frightened that you'll think they're not good enough or they're stupid or whatever. And so they are very defensive. But actually, when you just show curiosity and ask people how their day is going and what you can do, people are so delighted. And I use it like it's a tool. That doesn't really sound right, but I found in my everyday interactions with anybody who is there to offer me service, I make the effort to interact with them, and then I can guarantee I always get better service, because everybody wants to be heard, everybody wants to be listened to, everybody wants to be interesting. And it's just a massive shift in how I interact with people. And it's an amazingly fun place to work. Their culture, their 4 P's of culture, which is people, purpose, passion, and power. There's a real family feeling to it. It's very, I went there 15 years ago, I think. And I would say today I'm beginning to see the same things in other workplaces 15 years later. That, they were just so progressive. They also embrace a culture of, I'm sure you've heard this before, but ask for forgiveness later. So don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later. So that's so empowering for people to know that they can try something. And it's, it's simple things like they would route their customer service calls to people, if it was a call coming from Denver in Colorado, they would send it to somebody that they knew had like flags on their system where they had some relatives in Colorado, or they used to live in Colorado. So they would immediately be sort of wherever possible, just some common ground. And yeah, just incredible.
So people, purpose, passion, and power. They've got these 10 values. And I think it does sound as though they were very much ahead of their time. As I've invested myself in the work of culture, working for different brands around the world, helping them to find their cultural voice, you do see a more regular emergence of things like powerful core values that are practical and make sense. Equally, I'm always really surprised by how many companies are still so behind that curve. Even all these years later, companies that have values that are just statements, abstract statements, words on a wall, not something that you can actually take and turn into a practice or take and turn into an action. How those intentions of a business still don't translate into real world behaviors. Now, I imagine that Zappos for you, as you said, it was transformative. Would you say that has kind of really helped shape and inform what you're now doing with Tomrom and how you're positioning yourself as a business?
I think so. I mean, it changed how I see people completely, I think. It's interesting you talking about the statements on the wall, and this might be slightly unpopular feeling, but my 2 personal least favorite values are honesty and integrity. Because they basically overlap. So why would you bother having both? Not that it's good, not that it's not good, to be honest, but do you really have to have that as a value? Has it changed? Has it taken me down a path? I think so, yeah, because I work with emerging leaders a lot of the time. I work with small businesses who are trying to develop their culture, and trying to support them to understand that when they're hiring, for example, they really need to align on values, more so in a small business. Because if, for example, you talk about the Brady creators' quality of their podcast. So quality is one of their values. It has to be, because they're creative, but it's got to be good. It can't be average. It has to be good. And so you have to make sure when you're recruiting people to work with you that is also something that's really important to them. And in today's recruitment market, that can be really difficult. So it's not just about how somebody's going to fit in the team in terms of the dynamic. It's also about what their core values are.
Yeah, no, it's not just about execution. It's not just we need to recruit for the role just to get the job done. It needs to be, is this the kind of personality that shares our purpose, our passion, our power, right? Is this a personality who can grow with us and change with us? I think too often roles get recruited for against, does this person have the right skills or can they execute the role? And yes, that might be the immediate need, but your longer term need is, do you have someone here who can grow with you? And maybe they don't have every box ticked yet. Maybe they don't have every skill that you're looking for. So you might need to overlook a sense of urgency and immediacy and see the bigger prize when you're recruiting someone. Like, do they have actually the attributes that you're looking for? Do they share your sense of power and purpose, as I mentioned before? Now, thinking about all of this stuff, I'm sure that that some of the stuff we're going to go on to talk about probably connects with where we've already been on our journey together this afternoon. But I asked you to think about a leadership challenge that you see in the world at the moment, something that you're aware is a challenge to organizational culture, and the solution, like the practical thing that people can do to address that problem. So why don't you take those 2 points together? What's the challenge you want to highlight for our audience today? And what's the solution?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've looked at this from 2 different perspectives, I think. But I'm going to go with the struggle we have currently with trust. We feel a huge amount of distrust. The world is the most divisive it has ever been, I believe. And so people become small, their worlds become smaller because, well, you can't trust them. So we'll just focus on what we can. And they are looking to business to provide, I think, that stability and that honesty for them to lead the way. They're looking to trust the people who employ them, because they're not sure about how the country is led, or whether they're being educated correctly, or lots of different things. And I think it's 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be Gen Z or millennials who have a different expectation of workplace culture. It's more important to them, and that is only increasing with the generations to come. So I think for me, the solution for businesses is to look to their own house, and to say, actually, we're going to be a leader in this area. We're going to use our culture to lead, to make us, to distinguish us from the rest of the world. And we are going to say what it does on the tin. I think that's what people are looking for. And I think there's a balance to be had. And there's a lot of noise around, people want everything, they want it all handed to them on a plate, etc., etc. But it's an easy balance. It's not an easy balance. There is a balance to be had between allowing people to be individuals and express their own needs and be given those needs and to deliver as a business. And it's about coming together, and that is about communicating with each other and opening that conversation around culture and what's important and what your values are. The oversimplistic, perhaps, but
Well, no, it's an interesting line of inquiry. So I think what you're saying is that there is a generalized sense of distrust in the world around us at the moment. And when you begin to lose trust, your world gets a bit smaller. You feel a bit more hemmed in. You feel like you're not on solid ground. So increasingly, people are looking to leaders in the workplace to offer that sense of stability, offer that sense of authenticity, offer that sense of trust. And actually, I guess what we're saying is the world of work can actually try and expand your world a little bit, because it can be a place where you build trust, where you build a sense of community and camaraderie. And so where there is instability in the world around you, actually your place of work, your team, your boss can be some of those trust builders and stabilizers. And you mentioned authentic communication, you've mentioned trust. How can leaders kind of get started? Like, if you're aware that what people are looking for from the world of work is changing, and I as a leader need to own that zone of trust, that space of trust, and that space of communication. What are some of the ways that leaders can engage with that in a tactical and tangible way?
it's feedback, isn't it? It's ask the questions basically, and don't be afraid to listen to the answers. You know, most people do surveys, I think, customer surveys and employee surveys, but often they will ask questions to which they are happy to accept the answers, where they should ask more probing questions. I think it's a good thing to create focus groups, to actually talk to people face to face. I think that's something that I really enjoy doing. So I ran a focus group every 2 weeks. I took a cross section of the workforce, different people every 2 weeks, to talk about what was happening within the business and what was working, what wasn't working. And it was an opportunity for people to bring up issues that they were having. It breaks down some of the interdepartmental barriers. It takes time because, to begin with, people don't trust you. They don't trust that this is an open forum. They will feel if they speak out of turn that will have consequences. So it's sticking to things. I am a big advocate for sticking to things. There are times within some of the businesses I worked in where we were given an initiative and we had to sell it throughout the business, and then 18 months later there'd be a new initiative. And I am not a fan of that at all. I'm a big fan of, you make a plan and you stick to it. Now, don't get me wrong, things have to adapt and change, but to completely relabel it, rename it, call it something different, that's just a waste of time. It's just and people see it as that as well. They're like, oh, what's this year's initiative? And I think it takes time. People aren't used to feeling that they can speak up in a lot of businesses. So they need to be encouraged. You need to facilitate the meetings, not to lead them. And I think that's quite a big difference for a lot of people. Again, I have witnessed a facilitation conversation being done by somebody who only knew how to lead. And I think the conversation would normally have taken about an hour and it was done in 15 minutes because nobody felt that they could contribute because it wasn't done in a facilitative way. But yeah, it's conversations. It's just open the conversation and, use feedback. You can do it electronically. I know there's some fantastic survey resources available that can really make a difference to businesses. And, don't dismiss the information and ask more open-ended questions, less questions that the answer will be yes or no.
I think also you can ask questions that are more emotive in their response. I like to use questions with a 0 to 10 scale and ask people for a feeling, to indicate a feeling on a line, which in one sense can feel a little bit abstract. But in another sense, it's like when you ask somebody for feedback. If I present you with a document that I've written and I say, "Oh, Mhairi, could you give me some feedback on this document?" If I hadn't asked for feedback, you might have read it and gone, "Oh, this is great. This is amazing." But as soon as I ask for feedback, I'm putting you in a different frame of mind. And at which point you will then analyze it in a slightly different way and then offer me some feedback, whether you would have had some or not initially. So when we ask questions, when we ask open-ended questions, we need to think in that kind of frame of mind, to think, what is the kind of answer that I'm looking for? Am I looking for a feedback answer? Because if I frame it as give me feedback, that person is likely then to find some feedback. Maybe I just want to get an emotive response. So rather than asking feedback, I should ask, how do you feel about this? Indicate in the questions, be open with them, but also indicate kind of, what are you trying to understand? Because if actually you're saying, can you give us feedback on our culture? You're going to get probably some more analytical responses. Whereas if you ask, how does this culture make you feel? You're going to get a completely different set of responses. And actually what you need to do is hear from the emotion of the team rather than the analysis. Maybe it's a balance of both. Maybe it's a case of, let's get some emotional responses and then do some analysis. But because you've asked the emotional questions first, actually you're setting the tone for how you want the conversation to happen. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to be facilitators of those conversations by indicating, by being more open about the answers that we can receive and not being afraid of those answers, but also by trying to frame and shape the conversation in a really, really useful way. And two themes that have really struck me actually as we've been having this conversation is that for leaders, there is this theme of fear. The workplace is changing. It's asking more from you as a leader. And you are also, as a leader, exposed to a world of perhaps generalized distrust. So I think that can leave you feeling in quite a precarious situation. So you may feel that you don't want to ask questions because you don't necessarily want to hear the answers. But on the other side, you've got employees joining the business, millennials joining the business. No, I'm a millennial. We're talking about Gen Xers, right, who are joining the business. I think I said millennials before, but, if you're 40 and you're joining the workforce, welcome to the party, pal. We've missed you. But yeah, Gen Xers joining the business who have that different expectation. They're coming with a hunger and a desire to pursue trust, to expand their horizons a bit, to build some resilience into their world.
And
so
to have
sense
purpose.
Yeah.
They are much more purpose driven. It is a much greater part of their psyche than it perhaps, it certainly wasn't something that I was even talking about when I was 20 at all. And I think it's tapping into that sense of purpose and understanding that it's a good thing that people want to know they're working for an employer that is doing good in the world. And if you're not, if you're making plastic cups for IKEA and, it doesn't feel like the most wonderful place to work, then make it a nice place, a good place to work where people feel valued. It doesn't have to be that the work is, is life-changing. It is that it's a good place to work and people are respected and valued.
Yeah. So on the one hand, we've got this trust, desire for purpose on one side of this equation, and then you've got fear and complication on the other side. And actually, though, as a leader, I want to encourage you to be aware of that tension. Once you're aware of that tension, then maybe you can start to think, okay, so how do I deal with that? Rather than kind of operating out of fear, how can I become more aware of that tension that is growing in businesses and be the person who leads that change, asks the open questions, invites answers that might be difficult to hear at first, but ultimately, by getting real about those honest answers, you can actually make real progress. And I think that's what we long for in organizations up and down the country and, of course, around the world. Now, we always love to finish on something really, really practical. So if you could give people one takeaway to take action with today as soon as this episode finishes, what would that be and why?
Well, when I looked at this before, I came up with something, and now I feel quite differently because our conversation has evolved differently. And have a conversation, I think, would be my biggest takeaway, because that's exactly what I've done. So I've made assumptions around the topics that I've chosen to talk about, but as we've talked about it, a lot more has come to the fore. And I think it is, be brave and talk to people about how they like working there, and what if anything could be done differently, what would be their ideal workplace. And this is not about bean bags and slides. It's this is about feeling valued more than anything else. As somebody who doesn't drink coffee, it's not about the coffee either. But that seems to be a big thing now. But we have good coffee. Those things are one and done. Well, we give them good coffee. But actually, are you listening to your people? Are they able to have their say? What mechanisms do you have in place to help them understand more? So which does bring me back to what my initial point would be, which is know what the point of your business is. So I always talk about the point as opposed to the why, just simply because I think as a business, the point is a better word. Why can get quite muddled up in your personal why versus the company why. And so know what the point of your business is and share it with your people so they know what the point of the business is and what you're trying to do differently.
I think what we're really circling here is this idea of opening up that dialogue. Be open about what the point of your business is, have open conversations about those objectives, and ask people, what do they want to get from working with you? What kind of environment do they want to work in? And that might come with some challenging answers. But honestly, that's where transformation starts. That's where new seeds begin to grow. So have those open, honest conversations with your people today. Be honest about the point of the business and ask them, what are they hoping for from being on your team? I think that's a great place for leaders to start. And Mhairi, we are just about done for time. The plane is taxiing down the tarmac to the terminal. Just want to say a huge thank you. Great conversation. Thank you so much for making some time for Culture Crush. And let's speak again soon.
Thanks, Dan. Been great.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Culture Crush. If you've enjoyed your time with us, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening from. And if you're a culture first leader, be sure to visit anthem.oo because we've got lots in common. See you next time.